Welcome back, travelers, to Legendary Lore, where today we're going to be going over the next portion of the story for New Capenna. Now, what's interesting is that this has basically Elspeth's introduction to the Maestros and how she gets used to the things going on there. Angelo takes her to her room, which is basically a barracks, so it's pretty simple, bare bones, but it's for the recruits. And obviously, as you do more work for them, you go higher and higher up into the ladder.
Because this is easy. I get this awesome room and I only need to kill like 2 people a month.
I'm sure their screams won't haunt my dreams. So
they were probably bad anyway. I'm doing good.
Yeah, the Black, Blue, Red organization definitely has the best interest of the people at heart. So basically, while she's staying there, she's just thinking of the Phyrexians and how absolutely monstrous they are and how they're basically everywhere. As she goes through the museum, she can see like outlines of Phyrexians. She can see iconography of Phyrexians. Things she can interpret as Phyrexians, she's interpreting as Phyrexians because they're probably Phyrexians and no one sees it otherwise. And she also knows that there's got to be some secrets that no one else is seeing because none of these people seem to know what Phyrexians are. None of them seem to bring it up. None of them have any kind of trauma. Nothing's being mentioned about them. But she knew that if she wanted to find out more information, she should go to the curator, the leader of the Maestros, because he had to know something. He wasn't just collecting all these Phyrexian and angel things just by random happenstance. There had to be a reason he was doing it. And so she knew she had to find this demon, this vampire. When she sees the door to the cataloging room open and Xander walks out. And he's not very, obviously he's dressed very well, but he's not really showy with it. He's just kind of talking quietly, and the other 2 people are like listening and they're like writing down what they need to and everything, because obviously he's the boss, right? And she had only seen Xander from far away, thanks after her introduction to him by Angelo. Angelo was like, "This is Elspeth. She's going to be working with us." He's like, "Ah, welcome." That was basically it. But she knew there had to be something to him. And so she looks straight at Xander. And Xander's looking straight at her. And she does not look away. Because she's like, "I'm going to get his attention. This is the best way to do it. I'm just going to stare him down." And
Xander's just like, "I'm having another staring contest. This happens every time I see Jetmir now with this new recruit." Because Jetmir's a cat.
Yes. So he just tells the other 2 people, "Go." And then he looks at them and goes, you have your orders. And then he basically waves her over. And she comes over to him. "Walk with me." And she's like, "Okay, how have you found the family?" "Well enough. I hear no complaints about you. Your work is dutiful, skilled, and meeting expectations. Yet, no mention of you seeking to do more either." And she's like, "I'm here to learn, not bloody my hands." "Ha, but the price of knowledge is oftentimes found in the veins of others." It's like, okay. So she looks at his horns and is like, "No other vampires have horns here. So that's not something that's like unique to vampires of this plane." Because again, she's a planeswalker. We've seen all kinds of elves. Like the only other horned elves besides the ones in Capenna would be the ones you would find on Lorwyn, and they also have hooves. So there's different things for different kinds of creatures across the different planes of the multiverse. Goblins are one of the most varied, I'd say.
Yeah.
And she's like, "So you're saying I have to kill people to get the information I want?" And he's like, "No, not necessarily."
I'm implying it heavily, but...
Yeah, pretty much. But he says, "I don't want to send someone who does not want to kill someone, because that ends poorly, because they won't do it right. But I'm not a charity. So if you want more, you have to work for it." And so he's walking with his cane, and they're walking through all the marble and all the fanciness, and there's a ton of just pillars shaped like angels and stuff like that. And she's like, "Well, what do you want me to do then?" He goes, "A few jobs." And he's saying that he's going to be putting her to work. And if she gets put to work, she's going to become an actual member of the Maestros. He says, "You'll be in the Maestros for life. So think about that and keep that in mind. You can leave right now, and no ill from us will haunt you. This is a free will choice. And she's like, I'll do it. I'm ready. Because she knows this is her only method of getting what she wants to do. So she has a little package that is most likely full of Halo. And she was told to do a specific job and go and do it. And she goes and she continues and she gets there. She goes to this woman. She's an Obscura. She gives her the package and she leaves. And Xander's like, good job. There was no trouble along the way. And she's like, no, not really. No trouble at all. And so she had gone, she came right back, there was no questions. And she goes, now about the history of New Capenna. And he basically says to start from the beginning. And his start at the beginning is not the way we know it to have started. Remember how we actually did an Old Capenna episode where we found out about what happened in Old Capenna? Here, he says that it was a deal created between the archangels and demon lords, which we know wasn't the case. It was a deal between the demons and the heads of the families. But this is what he actually thinks happened. He says the enemy of an enemy is a friend, and that was no truer than during the construction of New Capenna. And she says, well, who was the enemy? Obviously Phyrexians. And he says, a mystery I still hunt for the answers to. And it describes him as rubbing his temples like he's trying to remember something that he had forgotten. He goes, but it was a grave enough threat, the angels became consumed with the defense of the plane. And through the details...
Does Falco know all this, though?
No.
Falco forgot it himself, too, even though he made the deal?
He made the pact, and the pact's deal, the writing in it, made them all forget.
Himself included.
Exactly.
Huh.
So, we don't know what happened as far as, if you lived in New Capenna, you do not remember the Phyrexians. And again, with Old Capenna's episode, we talked about how even people that come from the ruins still dealing with those Phyrexians, they very quickly forget because of the enchantment over New Capenna. And so basically to this point, she realizes that the reason he has horns is because of the fact that he is part demon. And she's like, yes, I was one of the original signers and I've willingly become part demon, in addition to my other sanguine gifts. And she goes, so you were there before the founding, but you don't know who they were fighting. And he says that time and the magic of the pact had distorted my memories. I was also not present for the great battles that took place. It is part of why I hunt for the information now to fill in the yawning gaps of my memories that threaten to swallow me whole. And so Xander's very old, even for a vampire. And he realizes that he has ailing memory. He does not remember what actually happened, and he desperately wishes to know. And so Elspeth's like, well, did we win? And he says, well, we're still here. So we must have. And he tells her, okay, that's enough. That's enough. We should go await my next orders, and then we'll get to talk again. And so then she has her next job. And again, I'm not going to go into a ton on it, but she deals with some raccoon folk that are living in the gutters and have some bootleg Halo. And so she eventually gets to this next person, and she says, here, get it done. But she barely survives fighting those raccoons, because all she has was a knife, and she was she was doing her thing, right?
Uh-huh.
And so basically he says...
I like how Elspeth's an RPG character.
Yeah, pretty much.
She's useless when she's unarmed. But oh no, my masteries are with swords and spears. My attack stat goes at your what? Yeah, my skill, your what? My agility, huh? She just pulls out a list of her stats. See these here? If I'm holding the sword and then it goes up. With the spear, it still goes up.
Yeah, pretty much. So basically, she shows back up. She's like, I need a weapon. And he's like, well, why would you need a weapon? And she's like, uh-huh. And she's because obviously she expects him to know. He goes, contrary to popular belief, I don't know everything that happens in this city. And she goes, well, you could have fooled me. He goes, good. That means I'm doing my job right. And so they made it. He's like, did you do the job? Yes. And there was no issues. Everything was good. And she's like, okay, good. I still need a weapon. And he goes, fine, you'll get a weapon when you have earned one and you're an officer among us. Until then, you may do. And so she's basically gets more information out of him. all this happens, he takes out some of the halo. He gives her some of the halo. And she takes a small sip and describes it as being warm, tasting like content, a long and lazy afternoon with Daxel. So it tastes like joy. It tasted of sentimentality and homes that existed only in her memories and imagination. Consuming it wasn't so much drinking as it was absorbing. It filled her with strength, with purpose. It revitalized her. Her senses were sharper, and she could feel a surge of magic course through her. So, like, she's like, I can see the appeal. The next part is her last job, essentially, where she meets Vivian. And that was the whole deal where Vivian showed up in the previous Legendary Lores, the whole deal with Urabrask. She meets Vivian. Vivian tells her that they have a common enemy. They both want to stop the Phyrexians, and they'll get to know each other later on. Elspeth gets back to her from the job, and she says that there was no trouble. And she says thank you for waiting because she was late to her actual meeting with Xander. And he says, I have important matters to discuss with you. And so she's like, oh, okay, cool. That's great. And what are these important matters? And he's like, the adversary. And so basically, he says that between the 5 families, they have a cooperative competition, right? The 5 families live in a balance. Yeah, people die. Yeah, things explode, go missing, stuff like that. But when it comes down to it, they have an agreement. You don't go for the big fish unless those bigger fish have allowed them to, right? The adversary upsets that balance. He's burning down the city little by little, taking bit by bit from everybody else until the structure will collapse in on itself. And so he says, we've created order from chaos. We've a structure that people can depend on and thrive in, and have a bit of fun while doing it. So basically all of that is what's threatened by the adversary, by Ob Nixilis, Ob Nixilis as they call him. And he tells her, you seem competent, resourceful, clever, and diligent.
It's like, that's right.
Perhaps most importantly, you're still unknown. I'm not going to ask you to go up against the adversary, but I want you to infiltrate the Cabaretti. They claim to have a way around it, the font, a way for them to make unlimited halo. And so basically he wants her as a spy to get in and find out more information about what it is. And so, with her trusty knife, she's like, okay, it's time to go, let's do it. So then we have the Cabaretti itself. And this is where we get Elspeth's actual artwork of her in the extremely fancy flowing feathered dress deal with the gold padding and stuff.
Xander makes that dress for her.
Xander made it specifically like that. And I love the way he says it too. And because she goes, do this for me and all the knowledge of the archives will be yours. And she goes, good. And she turns around to leave and he goes, oh, we're not finished yet. And she goes, pardon? Xander's face broadened into a amused smile. You're not walking into any cabaret dressed like that. It's so good. I love just he goes from being this intimidating mob boss to being like, girl, I'm going to get you the most fabulous dress ever.
Hippity bobbity boo.
Yeah, basically. Look what I can do for you. And so basically she has it's an actual battle suit. It's really cool the way it's designed. It says it was impeccably tailored and the plate fit her chest, shoulders, and hips immaculately while complementing the white silken layers beneath. The most impressive element was the scale mail that hugged her legs, made to look like fishnet stockings. The diadem on her brow made her feel like a queen and gave her the confidence she needed to enter the cabaret Xander had directed to. And it's funny because it's like a battle suit. This is designed for her. If she gets in a scrap, she can defend herself with her dagger. And it's funny because she says she had been wondering the entire way to the cabaret just when Xander had begun working on this outfit. And how? Because he sent her off. That means he had already made it. He already at some point got all of her measurements, most likely just by looking at her and being like,
he's an old vampire.
Yeah.
When you like making clothes that much, it's probably a skill you pick up.
Yeah, he's like, you're a very sound sleeper. She's like, what? And he goes, what? So basically she goes up and she goes to a bartender or the elf, and she's like, hey, I want a job. He goes, sorry, I don't got jobs, I got Halo. And it's at this point that Rocco shows up. And it's like, oh,
does Elspeth work for Rocco?
And Elspeth, like, Rocco is the bartender. And like that I just love that that's just a little bit. And when I first read through this, I didn't realize that the bartender was Rocco, because I just saw the name Rocco. I was like, oh, okay, cool. But the card I don't think had been released yet, or had been released like very recently, and I hadn't checked, so I didn't register that this was a person that actually mattered. And so basically Rocco is just like kind of there giving out Halo and talking to the person they're with. And it turns out that the person that he's talking to, he calls her Songbird. And the person that is now talking to Elspeth, saying, hey, would you like to work with me, is Kit Canto.
Oh, Elspeth's going to become a singer.
And so Kit is like, she goes, I'm surprised you don't know me. Surely you must have heard of the great songstress Kit Canto. And she goes, I can't say I have. And she's like, yeah, she's like, well, then you're in for a real treat. I'm on in less than an hour, so be sure to give it a listen, Miss Elspeth. Elspeth, really? And she's like, yes. Well, no, you absolutely must come with me. I know someone who would be tickled by a name like that. Because Elspeth is like naming your kid Gertrude, essentially. It's a name that you don't hear anymore. It's old. It's like they would expect somebody in their 90s or hundreds to be named Elspeth, not someone who looks like they're in their 20s. So that's why every time she says her name, people are like, oh, okay, cool. And so it's through this that Kit Canto introduces Elspeth to Ginny, the right hand of Jetmir. And so Elspeth meets Ginny, and she meets Giada, or Giada, however you want to pronounce the name.
Jada
Pinkett Smith. Gonna get slapped, hold on. So Elspeth, it says, was looking for work specifically to help with the crescendo. The kid's saying this. She struck me as someone you'd like with a name like hers. In a fashion sense like that, she could be a worthy addition to the floor team. So basically, she's just going to be a flapper. She's going to be a waitress. Like you said, like your bit. She's actually going to be a waitress.
I remember, because the story I read was her doing a waitress job.
Yes.
I guess I was putting that before in the timeline, where it's actually our plot point here.
Yeah, it's exactly the plot point here. And she says, you usually have a better sense for these things than I do, Ginny admitted. So she looked at Elspeth. So I have a few small jobs for you. Who knows, if you play your cards right, you might be in with the Cabaretti in time for the crescendo. Trust me when I say, it'll be a party you don't want to miss. And so Elspeth did the work to get into the Maestros. Now she's doing the work to get into the Cabaretti. For the Maestros. Because she's a maestro.
Like, when did I become red?
Yeah, pretty much. At least the Cabaretti have some white to them.
Yeah.
But we're going to see how that goes in the next episode.
Thank you guys so much for watching. We're going to go ahead and catch you guys next time with some more Cabaretti shenanigans here in New Capenna. Don't miss it. Leave a like if you like the video. Subscribe to catch our next episode. And as Ricky says, make sure you travel down a hole.
Oh, well.